Welcome to my channel, Hotspot with Loveth, the ultimate spot for all things entertainment, ranging from celebrity gists, reviews, interesting stories, and African folktales. Subscribe now. Evelyn Harrison lay in her hospital bed, utterly exhausted yet overjoyed, cradling her newborn daughter. They had named the baby Isabella, and she was the very image of her father, Charles, with the same curly chestnut hair and striking blue eyes. Evelyn's attention was drawn to a small crescent-shaped birthmark on Isabella's lower back. As she gently traced the mark with her finger, she felt an intense bond with her child. In the waiting room, the Harrisons' closest friends, the Williams, anxiously awaited the news. Margaret Williams, Evelyn's best friend since childhood, had stayed by Evelyn's side throughout the labor. As Evelyn's contractions began, Margaret and her husband, Richard, were the first to receive the joyful news of Isabella's birth, and they celebrated heartily with the Harrisons. On the morning of Isabella's dedication, Evelyn walked into the sitting room only to find her baby's carriage empty. Panic gripped her as she called for her husband, who was not with the baby. She summoned the gateman and the domestic staff, but none had seen Isabella. Everyone launched into a frantic search, yet there was no sign of the baby. Charles was heartbroken, and despite their significant resources, the Harrisons couldn't locate their daughter. The police suspected a kidnapping, but there were no leads. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the Harrisons' hope began to fade. The couple withdrew into their sorrow, the loss of their daughter, leaving a profound emptiness in their lives. Throughout this period of grief, the Williams were a constant presence, offering their sympathy and support as close family friends. Margaret and Richard Williams relocated to a small town several states away, bringing with them a baby given to them by Margaret's cousin. They named the child Emily and raised her as their own, offering a modest yet comfortable life. Emily grew up without the knowledge that she was given to them by Abigail, Margaret Williams' cousin, believing that the Williams were her biological parents and completely unaware of her true origins. Emily flourished, developing into a bright and kind-hearted young woman. She excelled academically and was well loved by her friends. However, despite her seemingly content life, she often felt an unexplainable emptiness, a lingering sense that something was missing. 18 years after the devastating disappearance of their daughter, Evelyn and Charles Harrison had channeled their grief into something meaningful. They established the Isabella Foundation in their daughter's memory, dedicating themselves to providing support and shelter to underprivileged children and assisting families who had lost a child. Their work took them all over the country, always carrying with them a faint glimmer of hope that they might one day find Isabella. On one such trip, Evelyn visited a community center in a small town called The Province to give a talk about the foundation's mission and her own personal journey. Among the audience was Emily, a bright and compassionate young woman who had volunteered to help with the event. As Evelyn spoke about her lost daughter, Emily was deeply moved by her story. She felt a profound sympathy and admiration for the woman who had turned her personal tragedy into a force for good. After the talk, Emily approached Evelyn, eager to learn more about the foundation. "Mrs. Harrison, your story was incredibly inspiring," Emily said. "I'd love to know more about how I can get involved with your foundation." Evelyn smiled warmly at the young woman. "Thank you, Emily. It's always heartening to see young people so enthusiastic about making a difference. Here, let me give you my contact information. Perhaps we can discuss some opportunities for you to contribute." They exchanged contact details, and over the following weeks, Emily and Evelyn kept in touch. Emily was captivated by the foundation's mission and felt a growing desire to be a part of it. She shared her thoughts with Evelyn, who was equally impressed by Emily's dedication and passion. One day, Evelyn called Emily, offering her the job of an assistant convener position in the foundation at Miami. Excited, Emily shared the news with Margaret Williams, whom she had known as her mother, about her new job she had gotten. When she told the Williams about her new job and the move to Miami, they were hesitant. Margaret and Richard had relocated from Miami years ago for reasons best known to them, and they didn't want to return there for any reason. The thought of Emily returning there filled them with dread. "Emily, are you sure about this?" Margaret asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Miami is so far away and we've built a life here." "I understand your concerns, Mom," Emily replied, But this job is an incredible opportunity. It will allow me to support myself and apply to the University of Miami. Besides, I feel a strong connection to the foundation's mission. I need to do this. After much insistence and reassurances from Emily, Margaret reluctantly agreed. Just promise you'll be careful and stay in touch. I promise, Mom, Emily said, hugging her parents tightly. Thank you for understanding. Emily moved to Miami and began her new role at the foundation. She quickly developed a close relationship with Evelyn, who took her under her wing. Emily admired Evelyn's strength and compassion, and Evelyn saw in Emily a reflection of the daughter she had lost. One weekend, Evelyn invited Emily over to her home for lunch. They spent the afternoon chatting and getting to know each other better. As they were wrapping up, Evelyn said, I have some clothes that I think would look lovely on you. Emily, would you like to try them on? Emily nodded eagerly. I'd love to, Mrs. Harrison, thank you. Evelyn led Emily to a guest room where the clothes were laid out. As Emily tried on a dress, Evelyn's heart nearly stopped when she saw a small crescent-shaped birthmark on Emily's back, identical to the one on Isabella. Emily, can I ask you something personal? Evelyn said, trying to keep her voice steady. Of course, Mrs. Harrison, Emily replied, slightly puzzled by the serious tone. Do you know much about your early childhood? About your birth parents? Evelyn asked, her eyes fixed on Emily. Yes, of course. I grew up with my parents in the province. It was a loving environment, though we didn't have much luxury since my parents earned a modest income, Emily replied. Who are your parents? Evelyn pressed. My mom's name is Margaret and my dad's name is Richard. Margaret and Richard Williams, Emily said. Evelyn's mind raced. Could it be a mere coincidence that Emily's parents shared the names of their closest family friends? She needed more information. Is there any problem, ma'am? Emily asked, noticing Evelyn's intensity. Not at all. You can have the clothes, Evelyn replied with a forced smile. That evening, Evelyn called Charles and shared her suspicions. My love, I think I might have found Isabella, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Charles looked at his wife in surprise. What do you mean? He said. There's this young lady working with the foundation who has the same birthmark as our daughter. Are you sure, Evelyn? Charles asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and disbelief. I need to be certain, but I have a strong feeling. What's more surprising is her parents' names, Richard and Margaret Williams, Evelyn said. It's probably a coincidence. It can't be the Richard and Margaret we know, Charles dismissed. We need to get more information. I'll have to get to know her parents. That birthmark is exactly like Isabella's, and I feel this connection with Emily. We clicked so easily, Evelyn said. My love, don't get your hopes too high, Charles advised. At Evelyn's next meeting with Emily, she discreetly collected a sample of Emily's hair to conduct a DNA test. As the days passed, Emily noticed the way Evelyn looked at her, sensing something was on her mind. Mrs. Harrison, is everything okay? Emily asked. I'm fine, Evelyn replied, just a lot of things on my mind. Though her tone was unconvincing. When the DNA test results arrived, Evelyn was with Charles in their bedroom. Her heart pounded as she opened the envelope. Her eyes widened as she read the result aloud to Charles. He took the paper from her, his own eyes growing wide with shock. Emily was their long-lost daughter, Isabella. Evelyn broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the confirmation of her suspicions. Charles held her in his embrace, saying, We have to get our daughter back. We need to understand how she ended up with the Williams. This has to make sense. The next day at the foundation, Charles was in Evelyn's office when Emily walked in. Good afternoon, sir, Emily greeted. How are you, my child? Charles responded warmly. I'm fine, sir, Emily replied slowly, surprised by Mr. Harrison's words. You sent for me, ma'am? Emily turned to Evelyn. Yes. We'll be organizing a fair at the province for children on the streets. Meet with the convener to draft a plan, Evelyn said. Wow, that's beautiful. It will be an opportunity to see my parents. I've missed them. And you'd get to meet them too, Emily said as Evelyn feigned a smile and exchanged a look with Charles, who couldn't take his eyes off Emily. Evelyn and Charles knew they had to handle the situation delicately. While they weren't entirely sure if the Williams Emily referred to as her parents were indeed the same Williams they knew, they felt the need to confront them cautiously to avoid driving Emily away. The upcoming fair presented the perfect opportunity to meet them and get the answers they desperately needed. On the day of the fair, the atmosphere was vibrant and festive. Children played games and volunteers handed out food, and families enjoyed the various activities. Emily was busy coordinating the event, her enthusiasm and dedication evident to all. As the event began to wind down, Evelyn and Charles approached Emily. Emily, could you introduce us to your parents? Would love to meet them. Evelyn asked gently. Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Our house isn't far from here. Once we are done, we can drive over and I'll introduce you, Emily replied, smiling. After the fair concluded, the Harrisons' driver drove them to Emily's parents' house, guided by Emily's directions. The car ride was filled with a mixture of nervous anticipation and cautious optimism for Evelyn and Charles. They had spent years searching for Isabella, and now they were on the verge of potentially meeting the people who had raised her. As they pulled up to the modest home, Emily led them up the walkway to the front door. Margaret's face turned pale as Emily walked into their living room with Evelyn and Charles. Richard, seated beside her, looked equally uneasy. Emily, unaware of the tension, made the introductions. Mom, Dad, these are my employers, Mrs. Evelyn and Mr. Charles Harrison. They've been really wonderful to me. Oh my, Margaret, Richard, it's you, Evelyn said, trying to maintain her composure. You both relocated and that was the last we heard from you, Charles added. Emily was surprised at the familiarity. You know each other? She asked. We were very close family friends. Your mother, in fact, is my childhood best friend, Evelyn replied. Wow, what a small world, Emily said. So you later had a daughter? I didn't know that, Evelyn said to the Williams, who looked dumbfounded. Emily, could you excuse us for a bit? Would like to have a private conversation with your parents to catch up on old times. It's fine, I'll just go to my room. All this time, Margaret and Richard were tensed. As Emily went in, Evelyn asked, You don't seem happy to see us. Both Margaret and Richard feigned a smile. It's not that. We're just surprised to see you. Richard said, How have you been? Evelyn and Charles remained calm, pretending not to know the truth about Emily as they quizzed Margaret and Richard. Very well, obviously. But I'm curious to know why you cut us off just after you relocated. Why, especially when you knew we were still mourning our lost daughter? It's been over 18 years now, Charles said, with Evelyn interrupting. That's true. 18 years plus, and Emily is about the same age. So you were pregnant when you relocated and you didn't tell us. Evelyn, I didn't know until we got here, Margaret said in defense. But how come she's 18? If you left Miami 18 years ago while pregnant, Emily should be around 17, not 18. Are you sure she's your daughter? Evelyn asked. What sort of question is that? Richard tried to be defensive. She is our daughter, and what's your business with how and when she was conceived? His voice raised a bit. Emily, from her room, heard the raised voice and slowly walked to eavesdrop on their conversation. Richard, why are you raising your voice at my wife? It's just a simple question from a dear family friend. We're just curious and catching up, Charles said mockingly. Well, you have overstayed your welcome here. You may leave now, Richard said, standing. Charles and Evelyn looked at each other, smiling. My love, I'm done putting up an act here, Evelyn said to Charles as she directly confronted the Williams. You shameless people. What is my daughter doing with you? How did she end up with you? I don't know what you're talking about, Margaret said. Really? You don't know what I'm talking about. You were with me at the hospital when I birthed Isabella. You were there when I lost her. You even comforted me during my mourning. You relocated and cut us off. Now, 18 years later, I find my lost child as your daughter and you're feigning ignorance? What are you even talking about? How do you know she's your child? Where did you get that idea from? Margaret asked. Evelyn chuckled. You want to know how? My daughter Isabella had a crescent-shaped birthmark on her lower back. That same birthmark is on Emily's back. Nonsense. Anyone can have a birthmark anywhere, Richard dismissed. Evelyn and Charles looked at each other, feigning a smile. Evelyn pulled out the DNA results and threw it at Richard and Margaret. You didn't think I would confirm my suspicions after seeing the exact birthmark my daughter had on Emily's back. The DNA result confirms that Emily is Isabella. So, start talking. How did my daughter end up with you before I take legal action against you? At this point, the evidence was overwhelming and Margaret and Richard became cold. Emily was shocked where she stood, eavesdropping. The Williams are not my real parents? She thought to herself, confused, but remained hidden. Margaret and Richard considered defeat, but stated they didn't know Emily was Isabella, noting that Margaret's cousin Abigail gave the child to them. So you are saying that Abigail, your cousin, kidnapped my child and gave her to you. Make it make sense, please, Evelyn said. How did Abigail end up with my child? Charles questioned. I don't know, Margaret replied. You don't know? Charles and Evelyn chorused. Call Abigail, Charles ordered. Richard and Margaret had grown more tensed. I said, call Abigail right now. We lost her contact, Richard said. At this point, Emily walked in. Mom, what's going on here? And since when did you lose Auntie Abigail's contact? I don't understand. How am I the lost daughter of the Harrisons? And you never mentioned Auntie Abigail gave me to you. What's all this I'm hearing? Emily questioned. You heard everything? Margaret asked. Of course, Mom. This house isn't too big. Mom, did you steal me from them? Emily asked further. Please help with my confusion, she continued. How can you ask such a question? Richard asked. Then why lie to them about not having Auntie Abigail's contact anymore when you actually do? Emily continued. Get inside, Emily. No one called you here. Get in now, Richard ordered. Why should she? Evelyn asked. You still want to hide the truth from her even when it's already in the open? Evelyn turned to Emily. My dear, your so-called parents said Abigail gave you to them. Please, may I have her number if you have it? At this point, Margaret and Richard felt powerless. Or better still, call your Aunt Abigail and tell her you'd be coming to spend some time with her. That way, you'd lead us to her. I'm sure you would want to get to the bottom of this as well. My beautiful daughter, Isabella, Evelyn continued. As Emily was about to make the call, Margaret confessed the truth, revealing the guilt that had haunted her for 18 years. I hated you. I hated you for flaunting your wealth and status in my face. Seeing the birth of Isabella as an opportunity, I planned with my husband to take her away from you so that you wouldn't have an heir. We paid Abigail to help us carry out the plan, and we took her as our own since we didn't have a child of ours. Everyone in the room was shocked by the revelation. Charles and Evelyn never thought that their best friends could harbor such hate and evil against them. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as she processed Margaret's confession. The room felt like it was closing in on her, the weight of betrayal crushing. Richard and Margaret, the people she had called Mom and Dad for her entire life, were suddenly strangers. And Evelyn and Charles, once employers, now stood as her biological parents, entwined in a web of deceit she couldn't fathom. Charles stepped forward, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. So, you stole our daughter because of some twisted jealousy. You ripped her away from us and led us believe that she was dead for 18 years. Margaret, tears streaming down her face, nodded. I was blinded by envy and bitterness. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. Charles, I never meant for it to go this far. Evelyn, her face a mask of pain, replied. You think saying sorry would just wipe off the deep pain you caused us for 18 solid years? You think so? She turned to Emily. Isabella, my dear, I know this is a lot to take in, but my baby, you have to understand, we've been searching for you for so long. We never gave up hope. Emily, feeling dizzy, leaned against the wall for support. I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything I knew is a lie. Richard, his own eyes red and swollen, tried to reach out to her. Emily, we may not be your biological parents, but we love you. We raised you with all the love we had. It's the audacity, Evelyn retorted. Emily flinched away from his touch, shaking her head. How can I trust anything you say now? You lied to me my whole life. Evelyn moved closer to Emily, her voice soft and pleading. Isabella, we don't expect you to understand everything right now, but please, come home with us. Let's make up for the lost time. Emily looked from Evelyn to Margaret, then to Charles and Richard, her mind swelling with confusion. I need time to think. I need to be alone. Charles nodded, his expression pained but understanding. Of course. Take all the time you need, my daughter. Emily turned and walked out of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. She picked a few things and left to a cheap hotel around the province where she could process all that she had heard without being in the faces of those that had sold a lie to her all her life. She sat on the bed, hugging a pillow to her chest, as tears came rolling down her cheeks. Over at Margaret and Charles's home, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Charles and Evelyn faced Margaret and Richard, the air thick with unresolved emotions. I promise you both, you would pay for this. I'll make you feel every pain I felt for 18 solid years. How heartless could you be? Evelyn spoke to the Williams in great pain, her voice breaking and tears dropping down her cheeks as Charles held her onto his embrace. Evelyn turned to Charles. My love, these people are heartless. They could have even killed us. What wrong did we do to them? She turned to the Williams again. All we did was to show you love. We loved you and you did this to us. No, I won't take this. You must pay for your evil. Margaret, in tears, her face a mask of regret, knelt as she pleaded. I don't know. I don't know what came over me. All I can say is that I am deeply sorry for what we've done. We are sorry. We will do whatever it takes to make things right. Evelyn grabs her phone and makes a call, calling for the arrest of the Williams. Minutes later, the force shows up, handcuffing Margaret and Richard and taking them away. We'll see next in court, Evelyn said to them as they were taken away. Emily spent the next few days in a daze, avoiding everyone as she tried to process her new reality. She barely ate, her mind replaying the revelations over and over. Evelyn and Charles stayed at a nearby hotel, respecting Emily's need for space, but making it clear they were available whenever she was ready. One afternoon, Emily decided she needed answers from the person who might know the whole story. Abigail. She picked up her phone and dialed Aunt Abigail's number. Who answered on the third ring? Hello, came the familiar voice, tinged with cautious curiosity. Aunt Abigail, it's Emily, she said, her voice trembling. I need to see you. It's urgent. Can I come over? There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Abigail responded, Of course, dear. Come by any time. Emily grabbed her keys and left. The drive to Abigail's house felt surreal. When she arrived, Abigail greeted her with a warm but concerned smile. Emily, what's wrong? You sounded so upset on the phone, Abigail said, leading her inside. Emily sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of the past few days pressing down on her. Aunt Abigail, I found out that I am not really the daughter of your cousin and her husband. They confessed that you gave me to them. I need to know the truth. How did I end up with them? Why did you take me from my real parents? Abigail's face turned pale, and she sat down heavily in the armchair opposite Emily. Oh, Emily, I was hoping you would never learn the truth like this. Please, Aunt Abigail, I need to know, Emily pleaded, her eyes searching Abigail's for any hint of the truth. Abigail sighed deeply, her hands trembling slightly. It was all Margaret's idea. She was always jealous of Evelyn, always felt overshadowed by her success and happiness. When Evelyn had Isabella, Margaret saw an opportunity to hurt her in the most profound way possible. She convinced me to help her, and I was too weak to refuse. Tears streamed down Abigail's face as she continued. We arranged for Isabella to be taken away on the day she was to be dedicated. I never thought it would go this far. I thought Margaret would come to her senses, but she didn't. They moved away, cut off all contact, and raised you as their own. I couldn't bear the guilt. That was why I left Miami as well and came down here to the province. Emily's heart ached with a mix of anger and sorrow. And you just went along with it. You never thought about the damage you were causing. Abigail sobbed, her guilt and remorse evident. I regret it every single day. I was a coward, Emily. I'm so sorry. Emily stood up, feeling a surge of determination. I need to go. I need to talk to Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. She left Abigail's house, her mind set on finding some semblance of closure. When she arrived back home, she met the absence of Margaret and Richard, wondering where they could be. She had no idea that the Harrisons had called for their arrest. Emily called Mrs. Evelyn, who informed her that they were at Rosewood Hotel. Emily drove to the hotel, her heart pounding in her chest. When she arrived, she asked for Mr. and Mrs. Harrison's room at the front desk. A few minutes later, they emerged from the elevator, their faces lighting up with cautious hope as they saw Isabella. Isabella, Evelyn breathed, rushing forward to embrace her. Emily allowed herself to be hugged, the warmth of Evelyn's embrace strangely comforting. I talked to Auntie Abigail. She told me everything. Charles stepped forward, his eyes filled with concern. Are you all right, my dear? Emily nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. I'm not sure what to do next, but I think I need to get to know you both. I need to understand where I come from. Evelyn smiled through her tears. Of course, my dear, we have so much to share with you, and we want to learn all about you. But I didn't see my parents at home, Emily said. Isabella, they are not your parents. They are thieves, Evelyn said. We called for their arrest, Charles notified. Really? Emily said with a mix of emotions. They might not be her biological parents, but she grew up with them and have come to love them. Though disappointed with the turnout of events and the mean thing that they did, she wasn't sure she wanted them to suffer this way. At least, they showed her love in the best way they could. As Emily was lost in thought in that moment, a touch on her shoulder from Charles startled her. I know you have known them as your parents all your life and you love them, but they have to pay for their sins, Charles said. Emily reluctantly nodded. We have a lot of catching up to do. You'd moved to us to Miami. I can't wait to spoil you with our love. I promise you, my dear, I'll give you all the best and make up for the lost years. Evelyn promised. The next day, the Harrisons returned to Miami with their lost but found daughter, Isabella. At their mansion in Miami, Evelyn prepared to let the whole world know that she had found her daughter. She was planning a grand event. She told Isabella that her birthday is in 3 weeks, 1st of July, and that would be the day for the grand event. I've always celebrated my birthday on the 1st of August, Emily said. Wow, they lied about that too? Evelyn replied in shock. She held her daughter. My love, I am your mother. I bore you on the 1st of July. I still have the pictures of that very day. Emily gently nodded. Isabella, I'm super excited to have you with us again. It hurts so much missing out on all your formative years. But I found you, and I'm grateful, and I'm definitely making up. As I announce you to the world on your real birthday, just prepare your birthday wish. Whatever you ask, I promise you'd get. I'll make your 19th birthday grand and special, Evelyn said. Emily forced a smile. Evelyn Harrison's heart was brimming with joy and excitement. She had found her daughter Isabella after 18 long years. Determined to make up for the lost time, she planned an extravagant birthday party for Isabella's 19th birthday. She wanted it to be an unforgettable day that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Evelyn hired the best event planners in the city to organize the celebration. The venue was set at the Harrison's sprawling estate, adorned with fairy lights, cascading floral arrangements, and elegant decorations in soft pastels. No expense was spared. Everything was to be perfect for Isabella's grand reintroduction to society as the Harrisons' heiress. Invitations were sent out to the country's elite, including prominent business magnates, celebrities, politicians, and media personalities. The media coverage promised to be extensive, with major outlets eager to cover the remarkable story of the lost heiress found. As the big day approached, Evelyn and Charles worked tirelessly to ensure every detail was perfect. They arranged for live entertainment featuring popular bands and artists. The menu was curated by renowned chefs, offering a delectable array of dishes. A grand cake, designed to resemble a fairy tale castle, was ordered to be the centerpiece of the event. The day of the party arrived and it dawned bright and clear. The Harrisons' estate buzzed with activity as final preparations were made. Guests began arriving in the afternoon, greeted by an impressive display of luxury cars parked along the driveway. The media gathered at the entrance, eager to capture the event. Isabella, dressed in a stunning gown chosen by Evelyn, looked every bit the princess. Despite the excitement, she couldn't shake off the unease that had settled in her heart. She had spent the past few weeks adjusting to her new identity and life. Although she was grateful, she couldn't forget the Williams who had raised her with love. The event was a resounding success. The guests marveled at the decorations, enjoyed the music, and savored the special delicacies. Congratulatory speeches were made and many expressed their happiness for the Harrisons. Evelyn and Charles were overwhelmed with joy and pride as they introduced Isabella to their guests. As the evening progressed, the moment arrived for Isabella to make her birthday wish. Evelyn, beaming with pride, took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here to celebrate this special day with us. Isabella, my dear, it's time for you to make your birthday wish. Remember, whatever you ask for, I promise you would get it. Isabella smiled, but she felt a pang of guilt knowing what she was about to ask. She stepped forward and took the microphone. Thank you all for coming. This means a lot to me and my family. I have a wish, but I'd like to share it privately with my parents after the party. Thank you. The guests applauded and the party continued with dancing and more entertainment. Evelyn and Charles exchanged curious glances but respected Isabella's request. After the party, as the guests departed, Evelyn and Charles led Isabella to a private sitting room. What's your wish, sweetheart? Evelyn asked, her eyes filled with love. Isabella took a deep breath. Mom, Dad, I know this is difficult, but my wish is for you to forgive the Williams and release them from jail. They've already spent 3 weeks there. I understand what they did was wrong, but they raised me with love and care. Please don't press charges against them. I plead. Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. Isabella, how can you even ask this of us? They took you away from us. They lied to you, to us. How can you ask this of us? Mom, I know it's a lot to ask, but you promised to grant my wish. They have made a terrible mistake, yes, but they gave me a good life. I can't just forget them, Isabella pleaded, going down on her knees. Get up, my daughter. You don't need to do this, Charles said as he placed a comforting hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn, she's right, we promised. And maybe it's time we let go of the anger. We have our daughter back, and that's what matters the most. Evelyn sighed, tears welling up in her eyes. All right, Isabella, if this is what you truly want, we'll do it. I'll call for their release and cancel the charges. Isabella hugged her parents tightly. Thank you, this means so much to me. The next day, Evelyn made the necessary calls and the Williams were released. Isabella's documents were updated to reflect her true identity as Isabella Harrison. The transition was smooth and the Harrisons spared no effort in ensuring Isabella had everything she needed. She was admitted to her dream school, the University of Miami, and her parents funded her education. Despite her new life of luxury, Isabella couldn't forget the Williams. She visited them secretly, maintaining the bond she had formed over 18 years. The visits were comforting, but she knew she had to tread carefully. Evelyn first sensed something was amiss when Isabella began making frequent and unexplained trips. Evelyn discreetly followed Isabella one morning. Her heart sank when she saw Isabella enter the modest home of the Williams. She instructed the driver to turn the car around and drive back home. When Isabella emerged in the evening, Evelyn confronted her back at the Harrisons' estate. Isabella, why didn't you tell me you were seeing them? Evelyn's voice trembled, a mix of hurt and betrayal evident. Isabella was taken aback but quickly composed herself. Mom, I'm sorry, I just couldn't abandon them. Yes, they have made mistakes, but they are still a part of my life, she explained, her voice pleading. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I will never understand. It's hard for me to accept. They took you from us. They stole all those years. The tension between mother and daughter lingered, casting a shadow over the otherwise joyous reunion. The next evening, Charles found Evelyn sitting alone in the garden, tears streaming down her face. He sat beside her and gently took her hand. Evelyn, we have to let her find her own way. No one is taking her away from us again. Let's allow her maintain her connections. It's part of our healing process, Charles said softly. Evelyn sighed, the tightness in her chest easing slightly. It's just so hard, Charles. I feel like I'm losing her again. Charles wrapped his arm around her. You are not losing her. She's grown up with them, and cutting them off completely would hurt her. Let's be grateful she's back and trust that she will come home to us every day. Evelyn took a deep breath, nodding slowly. At this time, Isabella had joined them in the garden. Turning to Isabella, Evelyn said, All right, Isabella, I'll try to understand. Just promise me you would always come back to us. She said, I promise, Mom, Isabella said, hugging her tightly. With her parents' blessings, Isabella continued to visit the Williams once in a while. Each time she left the Harrison estate, Evelyn felt a pang of sadness. But she reminded herself that this was necessary for Isabella's emotional well-being. Isabella navigated her new life, balancing her bond with the Harrisons and her loyalty to the Williams. It wasn't easy, but she managed to work it out. The Harrisons attended her university events and cheered her on at every milestone, while the Williams offered quiet support from the sidelines. Isabella's determination paid off when she graduated from the University of Miami with a distinction. The graduation ceremony was a grand affair, with both the Harrisons and the Williams in attendance. Evelyn and Charles beamed with pride as Isabella received her degree. Congratulations, sweetheart. We are so proud of you, Evelyn said, tears of joy in her eyes. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad, Isabella replied, hugging them both. The Williams approached cautiously, unsure of their place in this moment. Evelyn walked away, with Charles following her behind. Isabella, We'll be waiting in the car. All right, Dad. Isabella turned to the Williams with a warm smile. Thank you for being here. It means a lot to me. Margaret's eyes glistened with tears. We wouldn't miss it for the world. With her academic achievements behind her, Isabella was ready to step into the world of business. Charles began grooming her to take over the family's group of companies. He introduced her to key stakeholders, brought her into high-level meetings, and guided her through the intricacies of corporate strategy. Isabella proved to be a quick learner, her natural intelligence and the skills she acquired in the university shining through. She worked hard, determined to make her parents proud and to honor the name they had given her. Isabella threw herself into her new role with passion and dedication. She often stayed late at the office, learning everything she could about the business. Evelyn and Charles watched with pride as their daughter grew into a capable and confident leader. Despite her busy schedule, Isabella made time to visit the Williams once in a month, and each visit was a reminder of the love and care they had provided her. Her bond with her true parents continued to blossom. Charles and Evelyn always made sure to make the most of the weekends with Isabella, following the week's busy schedule and cherishing their time together. Over time, the tension eased. The Harrisons and the Williams found a way to coexist in Isabella's life. Family gatherings became more inclusive, and slowly, the two families began to coexist peacefully in the same space without the Harrisons having to walk out. Isabella's heart was full. She had the love and support of both families, and she was determined to honor that love in all aspects of her life. Isabella's leadership at the family's group of companies flourished. She brought fresh ideas and a modern approach, leading the company to new heights. Evelyn and Charles watched with pride as their daughter took the reins, confident that their legacy was in good hands. Isabella's success was celebrated by both the Harrisons and the Williams. They attended her corporate events and milestones, cheering her on as she carved out her place in the world. Isabella's journey was far from over, but she had come a long way. She had navigated the complexities of her dual identity, forged strong bonds with both her families, and established herself as a leader in the business world. As she stood in her office, looking out over the city, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. She knew that no matter where life took her, she had the love and support of her parents, both sets of them. Isabella turned back to her desk, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She was determined to honor the love and sacrifices of her families and to build a future that would make them all proud. As Isabella was typing on her laptop, she received a call on the office line. "Okay, let him in," she responded. A young, handsome, and well-built man entered her office, immediately capturing her attention. She found herself thoroughly captivated by his presence.